Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, How President-elect Biden Can Cut Carbon Emissions and Utility Bills with Appliance Standards. We will discuss in this webinar the findings of a major new report from the Appliance Standards Awareness Project, ASAP, and the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, ACEEE, that examines how much can be accomplished for the climate and for consumers' pocketbooks with appliance, equipment, and lighting standards adopted by the Biden administration's Department of Energy, or DOE, within the next 4 years. My name is Andrew Dulaski. I'm the Executive Director of the Appliance Standards Awareness Project and a report co-author. I'll be your moderator today. By way of introduction, let me just say a couple of words about the webinar hosts. ASAP is a coalition project led by a steering committee with representatives from the environmental, consumer, and low-income advocacy communities, the utility sector, state government, and energy and water efficiency groups. ASAP is based at ACEEE. The American Council for Energy Efficient Economy, ACEEE, is a nonprofit 501c3 organization that acts as a catalyst to advance energy efficiency policies, programs, technologies, investments, and behaviors. ACEEE aims to build a vibrant and sustainable and equitable economy, one that uses energy more productively, reduces costs, protects the environment, and promotes the health, safety, and well-being of everyone. Before we begin with the substance of our webinar today, I have a few housekeeping announcements. Your screen is customizable. Feel free to make the various windows as large or small as you would like. You can even minimize them to drop to the menu at the bottom of your screen. Click through the widgets at the bottom of the screen to be sure you aren't missing any options available. You can size items on your screen by clicking on the lower right-hand corner of an object. Presentations can be downloaded as PDFs from the presentation list in the menu. Attendees in the webinar are in listen-only mode, but can submit questions through the Q&A box at any time during the webcast. We will take questions at the end of the remarks of our presenters. The Q&A can be accessed in the menu at the bottom of your screen if it's not already visible. We will share a link to the slides and the recording within the next day or two. And now I want to introduce our distinguished panel of speakers. They are Joanna Maurer, Technical Advocacy Manager for the Appliance Standards Awareness Project, Kit Kennedy, Senior Director for the Climate and Clean Energy Program at Natural Resources Defense Council, and Charlie Herrick, Senior Attorney for Energy and Utilities Issues at the National Consumer Law Center. Before I begin handing over the webinar to our speakers, I want to take a few minutes just to provide some context for our report and for our work. Our subject is federal appliance, equipment, lighting, and plumbing product standards, for which we sometimes use the shorthand appliance standards. Congress enacted the original 13 U.S. appliance standards on a bipartisan basis in the late 1980s, and has expanded the law several times since, most notably in 1992, 2005, and 2007. Today, the federal law covers about 60 categories of products, ranging from common household devices such as refrigerators, furnaces, and light bulbs, to commercial products such as commercial building air conditioners and boilers, to electric motors used throughout industrial processes, to common household plumbing products. In enacting the laws, Congress recognized that technology is always on the march, always improving. Levels of efficiency performance that did not seem possible a few years ago can provide the basis for a future standard. Therefore, the law directs the Department of Energy to review each standard once every 6 years to determine if technology and markets have evolved to the point that updated standards are attainable and cost-effective for the consumers and businesses that buy and use the products. This policy has been extremely successful. Prior research by ACEEE found that standards have done more to save energy in buildings than any other U.S. policy. For consumers, we've previously estimated that the typical household spends about $500 less on utility bills each year because of existing standards, those already on the books today. It's an unsung hero, a policy that's been quietly saving consumers money for decades. It's also had a big impact on climate emissions. The Department of Energy estimates that standards that are already existing will have eliminated 8 billion tons of carbon dioxide emissions, 8 gigatons, by 2030. Just to put that number in perspective, the entire US economy in 2018 on net produced about 6 billion metric tons. At the same time, according to DOE, these standards have put $2 trillion in utility bill savings in consumers and businesses' pockets. That's an estimate from the US Department of Energy. But technology and markets have advanced and considerably more can be done. Unfortunately, DOE has fallen badly behind on its legal obligations to review and update standards. As of this month, DOE has missed more than 24 legal deadlines for updating standards, and many more for reviewing the test procedures that underlie these standards. Another approximately 24 deadlines are coming due within the next 4 years. President-elect Biden recognized the opportunity to save energy, save money, and reduce climate change emissions when he pledged to redouble efforts to update appliance standards during the campaign. Improved appliance standards are a key building block for meeting the objectives of eliminating climate change emissions, first from the power sector, and by 2050 from the economy as a whole. With this report, we show what can be accomplished with that redoubled effort. With that, I'd like to introduce Joanna Maurer, who's the lead author of the report. Joanna is the Technical Advocacy Manager at the Appliance Standards Awareness Project, where she's worked for the past 10 years. She leads ASAP's team covering the full range of US DOE appliance standards rulemakings for both residential appliances and commercial products. She's a lead author of several prior studies, including Better Appliances, an analysis of performance, features, and price as efficiency has improved. Prior to joining ASAP, Joanna worked for the EPA and also for the Center for Integrative Environmental Research. She worked for 4 years as a Peace Corps volunteer in the Dominican Republic. She has a Master's in Public Policy from the University of Maryland and a degree in Civil Engineering and Environmental Engineering from Cornell University. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Joanna, who's going to describe our research and what we found. Joanna.
Thanks, Andrew. So I'm going to start off by briefly describing at a high level the methodology we used for our study, and then focus mostly on what we found in terms of potential CO2 reductions, utility bill savings, and peak electricity demand reductions from updated appliance standards. So for our study, we looked at the potential savings from updated standards for 47 products. All but 2 of the 47 products are currently subject to national efficiency standards, and DOE initiated rulemakings for the other 2 products under the Obama administration. All the standard levels we evaluated could be met using current technology, and DOE could adopt all the standards through rulemakings that could be completed over the next few years. We constrained our study to look only at things that DOE could clearly do using existing administrative authority. So for example, in general, DOE is required to set separate standards for electric and gas appliances. And so we didn't look at, for example, what the potential emissions reductions would be from standards that would effectively eliminate gas appliances. To estimate the potential CO2 reductions, we looked at 2 different scenarios for the carbon intensity of the electric grid. The reference case under the EIA's annual energy outlook, and also a low carbon grid scenario. And we included the low carbon grid scenario to show how the emissions reductions from improved efficiency standards change if significant decarbonization of the electric grid is achieved in the coming decades. You can see in the graph that under the AEO reference case, the carbon intensity of the electric grid declines by about 28% between now and 2050. And then under the low carbon grid scenario, the carbon intensity of electricity declines substantially between now and 2030, and by 2050 is about 70% lower than under the AEO reference case. This graph shows what we found in terms of the potential annual CO2 emissions reductions from improved efficiency standards under the two different scenarios. The total reductions shown are broken down into reductions from electricity savings and reductions from natural gas and oil savings. Under both scenarios, the annual emissions reductions increase over time as more of the existing stock of appliances and equipment is replaced with models meeting the assumed standard levels. And we found that by 2050, potential annual CO2 reductions are 87 million metric tons under the low carbon grid scenario and 176 million metric tons per year under the AEO reference case. The CO2 reductions from electricity savings are lower under the low carbon grid scenario compared to the AEO reference case due to the lower carbon intensity of electricity. And the CO2 reductions from natural gas and oil savings represent about 50% of the total cumulative reductions under the low carbon grid scenario and about 25% of the total reductions under the AEO reference case. This graph shows what we found in terms of potential annual utility bill savings from updated efficiency standards. The top graph shows the potential annual bill savings for an average household. We found that an average household could save $230 on their annual utility bills in 2035 and nearly $350 on annual bills in 2050. And then the bottom graph shows the total potential utility bill savings for consumers and businesses, which are $41 billion in 2035 and $70 billion per year in 2050. Most of the total utility bill savings come from electricity savings, but there are also significant gas and oil bill savings and also water and wastewater bill savings. This chart shows the breakdown of the average household savings in 2035 and 2050. Water heaters represent the greatest potential savings. We evaluated standard levels for electric water heaters based on heat pump technology, which can reduce energy use by more than 60%. And then for gas water heaters, we evaluated standard levels based on condensing technology, which can reduce energy use by more than 20%. We also found that updated standards for faucets and shower heads represent large potential savings, and that's because updated standards would reduce water and wastewater bills and also would lower energy bills due to reduced hot water consumption of those products. Other products that contribute the most to the average household savings include light bulbs, central air conditioners and heat pumps, refrigerators, clothes dryers, and furnaces. This graph shows the potential annual peak electricity demand reductions from updated efficiency standards. We found that by 2050, peak demand could be reduced by almost 90 gigawatts, which is equivalent to about 13% of current total peak demand. And these reductions in peak demand would enable the faster decarbonization of the electric grid at a lower cost, by allowing existing fossil fuel power plants to be retired sooner and also reducing the investment required in clean energy, such as new wind and solar generation. In terms of potential cumulative savings, we estimated that potential cumulative CO2 reductions through 2050 are 1.5 to 2.9 billion metric tons, which is equivalent to the emissions of about 13 to 25 average-sized coal plants over that period. And the potential cumulative utility bill savings for consumers and businesses are $1.1 trillion. This chart shows what we found in terms of the top dozen opportunities for carbon reductions under the AEO reference case and the low carbon grid scenario. And the graphs are showing potential cumulative reductions through 2050. We found that Updated standards for residential water heaters represent the greatest potential CO2 reductions under both scenarios. And that's because water heaters are a major energy consuming product and because of the large potential savings, in particular from heat pump technology for electric water heaters. Under the AEO reference case, other major energy using products used in homes that are also in the top dozen include furnaces, light bulbs, central air conditioners and heat pumps, refrigerators, clothes dryers, and shower heads. There are also several major equipment types that are used in commercial buildings and factories that are in the top dozen, including commercial and industrial fans, commercial refrigeration equipment, electric motors, and commercial packaged air conditioners and heat pumps, which are also known as rooftop units. And then distribution transformers, which handle virtually all the electricity consumed in the US, are also in the top dozen. And while the other 35 products in our analysis each represent smaller potential CO2 reductions, their combined potential is roughly equivalent to the potential from water heaters. And then under the low carbon grid scenario, the CO2 reductions from electricity savings decrease relative to the AEO reference case, while the CO2 reductions from natural gas and oil savings are the same. And so under the low carbon grid scenario, there are more products in the top dozen that save natural gas, including faucets, commercial water heaters, and commercial furnaces. In addition to the really large potential savings that could be achieved through updates to efficiency standards, there are also additional things that DOE could do to achieve even greater savings than the savings that we've estimated in our report. So first, DOE could set standards for new products that aren't currently subject to national standards. This isn't an exhaustive list, but some of the examples that we've highlighted in the report include air purifiers, commercial lights, computers, portable electric spas, and televisions. Several of these products are currently subject to state standards, and most existing national standards started out as state standards. DOE could also broaden the scope of existing standards. So for example, the current standards for motors apply only to specific motor types. They don't cover many inefficient motor technologies, and they also don't cover advanced high efficiency motor technologies. And then finally, for many products, improving the test procedures that are used to measure products' energy and water use can be as important for achieving savings as setting new standards. One example is that for a number of products, current test procedures measure efficiency at just a single load point, even though the equipment operates at a wide range of load points in the field. For example, the test procedure today for room air conditioners measures efficiency only at an outdoor temperature of 95 degrees, when the equipment has to work very hard, even though room air conditioners spend a lot of hours typically operating at significantly lower outdoor temperatures. And so the current test procedure isn't capturing technologies such as variable speed compressors that can improve efficiency over a wide range of operating conditions. And so improvements to a range of test procedures to capture part load performance could enable significant additional savings. And then in the report, we've identified some additional cross-cutting test procedure recommendations, as well as some recommendations for specific products. To conclude, strengthened appliance standards can deliver significant CO2 emissions reductions and large utility bill savings. And the Biden administration should prioritize quickly advancing updates to national appliance standards. Just a few of the things that the new administration could do initially would be first, to develop a 4-year schedule for catching up on missed deadlines and meeting all future deadlines for reviewing and updating appliance standards. Second, the new administration should remove hurdles to strengthening standards. For example, the Trump administration revised what's referred to as the process rule, which outlines the procedures and policies that DOE uses to establish standards. And the amended process rule will make it harder for DOE to quickly advance strong standards. And so DOE should either repeal or significantly modify the process rule. And then finally, the Biden administration should set ambitious goals for what should be achieved through updates to appliance standards. What we've shown in our report is that the administration could achieve cumulative emissions reductions of 1.5 to 2.9 billion metric tons, could save consumers and businesses $1.1 trillion on utility bills, and by 2050 could reduce peak electricity demand by an amount equal to about 13% of current peak demand. Thank you, and I'll turn it back to Andrew.
Thank you, Joanna. And I want to just remind folks that if you have questions that you want to address during the Q&A period, to go ahead and put those into the Q&A at this time. I'm now going to turn to our next speaker, who is Kit Kennedy from the Natural Resources Defense Council. Kit leads NRDC state and regional climate and energy advocacy across the United States with more than 30 years of experience as an environmental and clean energy advocate and attorney. She directed the Environmental Protection Bureau at the New York Attorney General's Office from 2007 to 2010 and has taught environmental and clean energy classes at Yale Law, Fordham Law School, and Vermont Law School. She serves on the board of the New York League of Conservation Voters Education Fund, the Alliance for Clean Energy New York, and the executive board of the New York State Bar Association's Environmental Law Section. She's also a member of the American College of Environmental Lawyers. She's a graduate of Harvard Law School and Harvard College, and she's based out of NRDC's New York office. Kit will explore the climate imperative for action on appliance standards. Kit.
Thank you so much, Andrew, and thanks to you and Joanna for a really great and informative report. I also want to thank everybody at the Appliance Standards Awareness Project and the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy for bringing forward these important recommendations. I'm honored to be part of this event with you and with Charlie Herrick from the National Consumer Law Center, the renowned advocate for low-income consumers. When President-elect Joe Biden takes office in January, he'll lead the United States in a time in which our country faces intertwined crises related to climate change, COVID-19 and its related economic impacts, and racial injustice. Ambitious, cross-cutting, and well-designed climate action by the federal government can address each of these crises by delivering climate, health, and jobs benefits with climate justice at the center. Strong energy efficiency standards will be key to that effort, and the ASAP report shows just how much. Simply put, repairing, restoring, and expanding the federal energy efficiency standards program is a job for day one of the Biden administration. This is indeed a powerful priority. Science tells us that we need to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade to avert the worst of the climate crisis. To meet that goal, the U.S. needs to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050 by transforming to a clean energy economy. And we need to do so in a way that reduces the twin burdens of health-harming pollution and high energy bills that disproportionately affect low-income and communities of color. The good news is we can still avoid the worst impacts of climate change using tools and technologies that are readily available, first and foremost, energy efficiency. We'll need to double down on energy efficiency as a key solution for averting the worst of the climate crisis, cutting health-harming air pollution from fossil fuel power plants, and cutting energy bills. We know how to solve this problem. The biggest risks are inaction and delay. Simply put, using energy more efficiently is crucial to America's efforts to fight climate change. It's our best weapon. Efficiency lowers carbon emissions and consumer energy bills, strengthens the electricity grid, and as Joanna points out, reduces the demand on the grid during times of peak power, helping to back off the dirtiest fossil fuel plants. And it avoids the air and water pollution that threatens our health. Efficiency is also the most economical way to serve customer needs because the cheapest and cleanest kilowatt hour is one you don't have to generate. The powerful priority report, which Joanna has just presented, highlights the important role of the U.S. Department of Energy Efficiency Standards Program in fighting the climate crisis and cutting energy bills. As the report points out, DOE appliance standards also play a critical role in helping to ensure that savings from efficiency improvements reach the people who need them most. 1 in 3 U.S. households faces challenges in paying energy bills and heating and cooling homes, and many Black, Hispanic, and Native American households have the highest energy burdens. A quarter of all renters have extremely low incomes. Because landlords have no incentive to purchase efficient appliances when tenants pay the energy bills, renters are much less likely to have efficient appliances. The DOE Energy Efficiency Standards Program helps to improve equity by reducing energy burdens and ensuring that all appliances sold meet minimum federal efficiency standards, complementing other methods of supporting low-income consumers. And I know Charlie will be telling us much more about these energy burden impacts and what to do about them. The DOE Energy Efficiency Standards Program has a strong bipartisan track record. It was created in 1987 under a Republican president, a Republican Senate, and a Democratic House. Congress has strengthened the programs several times since then. And DOE efficiency standards have been strongly supported by widely diverse interests over the past 4 decades. These supporters include not only efficiency and environmental advocates, but also consumer and low-income consumer groups, utilities, state officials, and many manufacturers. Our national standards program in the past has produced enormous carbon and energy dollar savings, but there are still far more savings to be achieved. As the Powerful Priorities report explains, under the Trump administration, frankly, the decades-old DOE standards program has gone off the rails. The Department of Energy is legally obligated to review existing standards under a schedule established by Congress. But under the Trump administration, DOE has fallen far behind schedule. In fact, NRDC, joined by consumer and low-income consumer advocates as well as other partners, just sued DOE over its inaction on 25 standards that would save households and businesses at least $22 billion annually on their utility bills. 14 states plus New York City and Washington, D.C. have filed a parallel challenge. And the damage to the efficiency standards goes even beyond these illegal delays. For instance, DOE rolled back light bulb standards that would have saved consumers billions on their utility bills and would have avoided 38 million tons of climate-warming carbon dioxide emissions every year. Actions now being challenged in the courts by NRDC and other partners. DOE also finalized changes to the efficiency standards process that will slow down and create hurdles to future efforts to make America's appliances and equipment more efficient. NRDC and other partners, again, have sued. Earlier in the Trump administration, DOE attempted to block 4 important energy efficiency standards finalized by the previous administration. NRDC, Sierra Club, consumer advocates, and others successfully sued to finally force the DOE to publish these long-delayed standards in the Federal Register. DOE last month created a new class of dishwashers that won't be subject to any water or energy efficiency standards at all. That just doesn't make sense. These efforts to undercut U.S. energy efficiency are shameful, but certainly reversible. Now is the time to dramatically scale up action to reduce the most harmful effects of climate change, using improved efficiency standards as a critical tool. We have an opportunity now to restore the National Appliance Program's remarkable momentum and take advantage of the emissions-reducing opportunities that have been ignored for the last 4 years. The Powerful Priorities report provides a blueprint for the Biden administration on how to regain the lost ground for this important program and to maximize its benefits, starting on day 1. Thanks again, Andrew, for the opportunity to join this webinar.
Thank you, Kit, for those remarks. And again, Kit will be available for the Q&A session after we've finished our final remarks from Charlie Herrick. So just to introduce Charlie briefly, Charlie is a senior attorney for energy and utilities issues at the National Consumer Law Center, which works on behalf of its low-income clients. He represents consumers before regulatory agencies testifies at legislative hearings, and provides legal and policy counsel to low-income advocates, legal services lawyers, and government officials. He also devotes much of his time to training lawyers, advocates, and frontline social services staff regarding the rights of utility customers and contributes to NCLC manuals and publications. Much of his work also focuses on energy efficiency issues. Charlie will explore why improved standards are important for consumers, especially those with the lowest incomes. Charlie.
Thank you so much, Andrew and Joanna. It's a pleasure working with you. The Appliance Standards Awareness Project has been doing such amazing work, and NCLC has been really proud to be a partner with you. And Kit, of course, the same for you. And RDC is an amazing organization, and I'm thrilled when I get to work with you. So I want to paint a picture of why the National Consumer Law Center, with the mission Andrew just summarized, works on appliance standards, which is really the question, why does this matter for low-income consumers? So I'll start with something Andrew mentioned way at the beginning, which is due to the standards already in place, the average household is saving about $500 a year on their energy bills. You could think of that as either a significant portion of their total energy bill for the year, or you can think of it as about the average monthly food budget for an American household. So although $500 from one perspective might not seem like a huge amount of money for the low-income households we work with, it's a tremendous amount of money and a tremendous benefit. And it's one of the reasons we work on this. Looking forward, again, Andrew and Joanna shared these numbers, but I just want to flag again, even by 2030, these proposed standards would save a household about $100 a year, and by 2035, it would be $230 a year, an aggregate benefit of $41 billion for consumers. I also want to talk about something that is a little apart from the pocketbook benefits of these standards programs, and that's the impact of climate on low-income people. I remember when Katrina hit that suddenly the National Consumer Law Center, headquartered in Boston, was getting calls from advocates in Texas about how do we connect recently relocated people in Texas who don't have a history of paying utility bills in Texas. How do we get them connected? And that's because the poorest people in that kind of weather catastrophe often don't have the choice of returning back home. And they fled and they went to other states. And similarly, when Hurricane Maria and other hurricanes hit Puerto Rico, some of my colleagues had to fly down to Puerto Rico to help people figure out how do you keep up with the mortgage payment when your life has been devastated by a hurricane. So it's incredibly important for low-income people that we get a handle on climate change, and these appliance standards programs are, as Kit said, one of the best tools we have to do that. I want to say a few words also about racial equity. The coronavirus has underscored something we at the National Consumer Law Center know well, which is not only do low-income people have higher energy burdens, but they are at the disadvantage of all kinds of health problems and social disruptions. So people of color are more likely to get the virus, more likely to wind up in the hospital, and the thing that I've been working on, more likely to be at risk of termination in this environment. And so whatever we do for standards, even though it may take 5 or 10 years for those benefits to fully kick in, when we get low-income energy bills down, we are helping people stay in their homes. We're helping them be safe and healthy. And that gets to my next point, which is the problem of split incentives. And I'll share a story that I shared with Andrew and Joanna and Kit just before we started the webinar. I'm on the Massachusetts Energy Efficiency Advisory Council. And one of the things we've been wrestling with around equity the last few years is how do you get small and medium-sized landlords to engage with that program? And so there was a utility that had a landlord meeting, and that person says, how many of you know about the Mass Save program? And that's the utility energy efficiency program. And every hand in the room goes up. How many of you have accessed the program? Every hand in the room, maybe but one goes up. How many of you accessed it for your investment properties rather than for your own homes? No hands go up. So it is very hard to deliver energy efficiency in rental properties. The value of the standards programs, it simply creates a floor below which products aren't sold. And so the landlord, even if the landlord buys the least acceptable, least efficient product that's allowed under that set of rules, at least that is some level of efficiency that's been baked in by those federal rules. And so standards have been very important for low-income households. One of the standards we've worked on and off over the decades. are for furnaces. If that landlord buys an inefficient furnace, that household is saddled with higher energy bills, often for decades. And so the benefits to tenants and low-income people is very important. So I just want to underscore that in addition to all the reasons that Joanna and Kit have said that these are important programs, the standards programs, they're very important for consumers, and National Consumer Law Center has been very proud to be part of this effort, along with the Appliance Standards Awareness Project and the Natural Resources Defense Council. So thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Charlie, for those remarks, and thank you, Kit and Joanna, for your presentations. These are really informative. We're now going to move to the Q&A portion of our agenda. If you have a question, feel free to put it into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We have some initial questions that have already come in. The first question that we want to go to is for Joanna. The question is, can you give an example of how some of the appliances could be made more efficient?
Sure. So a few examples for air conditioning equipment. Variable speed technology can provide really large savings. For gas furnaces and water heaters, condensing technology, which extracts additional heat, can provide large savings. For both residential and commercial refrigerators and freezers, things like more efficient compressors and improved insulation have the potential to provide significant savings. And then for one of the products that we show as having the largest savings potential, commercial industrial fans, the big savings there are really from improving fan selection for the particular application. So those are a few examples of how efficiency can be improved.
Okay. The next question I'm going to direct to Kit. Kit, this question is there anything the Biden administration can do immediately beyond the planning that Joanna outlined to strengthen appliance standards that won't require rulemaking, which can take years?
Well, this is definitely a job for day one of the Biden administration. It has to be a top priority. President Obama, in day one or close of his first term, issued an executive order directing the Department of Energy to meet all legal deadlines and to accelerate the program. So that is day one action that can be taken. And getting the rulemakings back on track is really, really important, and it can be done in a way that is both transparent, fair, fully compliant with the law, and much speedier than we've seen in the past.
Okay, thank you. The next question I'm going to turn back to Joanna is, thanks for the informative presentation. The top opportunities for carbon reduction appear to combine residential and commercial markets. The question is, can you comment on the top opportunities for the commercial market?
Sure. So I'll just go back to this slide where we show what we found to be the top opportunities for carbon reductions. So what we show here is that we found the top opportunities for commercial industrial products are commercial industrial fans, commercial refrigeration equipment, which are used in places like supermarkets, restaurants, commercial kitchens, and commercial air conditioners and heat pumps, which cool a lot of the commercial floor space. And then, as I mentioned, under the low carbon grid scenario where natural gas savings become more important, things like commercial water heaters and commercial furnaces, which use natural gas, also become important savings opportunities for the commercial market.
Okay, thank you. The next question I'm going to direct to Charlie. The question is, what role do you see for utilities in supporting more efficient federal or state level appliance standards?
Well, certainly it's a good thing when utilities do support those standards. They often have resources and expertise that helps us make the case before the Department of Energy. I work in Massachusetts, and the utilities see it as a key part of meeting their savings goals. Hopefully we could get more utilities around the country to both see the importance of energy efficiency overall and working to support standards as part of that effort.
Okay, thank you. This is another, I'm going to turn back to Joanna. The next question is from one of our colleagues in Europe. The question is, here in Europe, faucets and shower heads are not regulated despite the large savings that could be achieved. Are there U.S. federal level standards for these appliances?
So yes, we do have standards, national standards for faucets and shower heads in the US. They've been around for decades, although they haven't been updated in more than 20 years. Faucets and shower heads are a little bit unique in that currently they're not preempted, which means that states can set standards that are more stringent than the current national standards. So a number of states have recently adopted more stringent national standard, or I'm sorry, more states have adopted more stringent standards at the state level than the current standards we have at the national level. So it remains an opportunity for state action in addition to an opportunity for DOE to set more stringent national standards.
Okay, thank you. I will take the next question. It's a question about national level compliance and enforcement system. The question is, what are we looking at for national level compliance and enforcement system? And the answer to that is that prior to the beginning of the Obama administration, there wasn't much of a national enforcement and compliance system. But at the beginning of the Obama administration, the department created an enforcement office within the Department of General Counsel at DOE that is still up and operational and has been for the past decade or so. It'll be important as the Biden administration comes in to reinvigorate that office, to ensure that standards are effectively enforced, to provide a level playing field for all manufacturers. So it is a very important function. It is within the Department of General Counsel at DOE, and reinvigorating that office early in the next administration will be quite important. Here is a question for Charlie. The question is, are there any good examples of programs that have addressed the landlord split incentive problem which could be addressed at the federal level?
That is a really good question, and I wish I had a really good answer. So far, it has taken very hard work and a commitment over time to that work, involving the utilities and the entities that actually deliver it at the ground level to consumers. You have to engage landlord associations. You have to, one idea we've talked about in Massachusetts is to actually pay closers who bring the landlords into the program, because the barriers have been so high. So I don't have a really good solution at the federal level, although a related idea we have been talking about is to get the federal government more engaged in pushing utilities to spend more money on energy efficiency. But the landlord barrier problem is a very tough one. Every state that wrestles with it does the best they can. I wish I had a better answer to that question.
Okay, thank you. Next question I'm going to direct to Kit. Are there any specific steps DOE should take to improve on the process rule, or should it simply repeal it?
Thanks, Andrew. So the process rule, I mentioned it in my remarks, is guidance on how DOE goes about adopting efficiency standards. the Trump administration attempted to, quote unquote, reform the process rule and did so in a way that, in my view, violates the statute and makes it harder, puts more obstacles in the way of establishing the energy efficiency standards that we need. So didn't improve it, didn't improve the situation at all. So my view, and again, NRDC and others have challenged the process rule. And so I think DOE under the new administration should step back from that rule, should either repeal it or go through the process to go back to the former rule, and then should think about what additional actions are needed to really improve transparency and expedite the efficiency standards process. So, the Trump administration, again, never came forward with a single efficiency standards, fell behind, screwed up the process, and the Biden administration really needs to start on day one at square one to repair things and expand the program.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to direct the next question to Joanna. This is a question about appliance reliability. The question is, how does appliance longevity, long-term reliability factor into the value to consumers? More efficient items are starting to bring only marginal increases in efficiency, but with potentially much more complicated machines and electronics that cost more to buy and won't last as long as more simple items. Maybe Joanna can take that question first, and Charlie or Kit, if you want to follow up, feel free.
So what I can say in kind of in general in response to that question is, we did look at, Andrew mentioned the report we looked at, what we published a number of years ago called Better Appliances, where we looked at how products have changed over time as efficiency standards have taken effect and energy use has gone down. And what we found is that over time, as products have gotten more efficient, performance has generally stayed the same or improved. Manufacturers continue to offer new features to consumers. And in many cases, prices have actually declined over time as products have gotten more efficient. And so I think what we've seen in general is that really manufacturers continue to offer improved value to consumers in terms of the products that consumers are getting, in addition to the really significant energy and water savings that we've seen over time.
Charlie or Kit, do you want to tag on to that answer?
Well, certainly Joanna is much more the expert, but I have to say the residential products that we have been involved with, refrigerators have far more features, larger capacity, lower price in real dollars. So I can't say that on the consumer side, we've heard of anything about the products having shorter useful lives. They certainly tend to have better features, and the prices have generally not increased as the standards have increased. So I think it's been a consumer plus overall, even from that perspective.
Okay. There's a couple questions about timeline for DOE action. Can you speak about the timeline for issuing new standards? How much can be done in 2 years and 4 years? And also another question about timeline, which I'll take. So the timeline for DOE rulemaking can be extended, or can take a while. The good news is that DOE has been working on standards on some of the pre-rulemaking stages particularly over the past year. Congress really has put a spotlight on the delays at DOE, and we have seen an uptick and significant increase in rulemaking activity, particularly over the past year, past 18 months. And that provides the basis for the new administration to move forward with some standards relatively quickly. In addition, there were some standards that were proposed at the end of the Obama administration, in particular for residential furnaces and commercial water heaters, that had been basically held in abeyance for the past 4 years. Those could be moved on relatively quickly. So we're not, the Biden administration is not starting from a standstill, and that's good news, in large part because Congress has provided substantial budgets for appliance standards work over the past several years, and DOE has been doing some of the pre-rulemaking work, pre-proposal work necessary to lay the groundwork for DOE to issue proposed standards and final standards within the first year or two of the Biden administration. Things that are just getting started at the beginning of the Biden administration, typically the rulemaking process takes on the order of 3 years to go from an initiation to a final rule to issue a new standard. Anything that, Joanna, you would add on the timing for rulemakings?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Here is a question for you, Joanna. There are so many great examples of how much can be saved in many areas. However, is there a library of case histories which we can draw upon? Everything from single home water heating, replacements to sharing of HVAC savings for multi-tenant offices.
So in our Better Appliances report, we looked at 10 products, both residential, commercial, lighting and plumbing products. And we looked at how those products have changed over time and how energy and water use have gone down over time. There are also other academic studies out there that have looked at how products have changed over time as efficiency has improved. I don't know of a library per se, but there's definitely been significant academic work done looking at how products have changed as efficiency standards have taken effect.
All right, thank you. We have about 5 minutes left, so if you have a question, please put it into the chat or into the Q&A, and we will work to address them in our final few minutes here. The next question we have is a question about incremental costs, which I'll direct this one to Joanna as well. In your experience, how big of a barrier is the incremental cost of more efficient products and increasing minimum standards? How has DOE factored in higher costs when deciding whether to increase a standard?
Sure. So the economic impacts on consumers as well as impacts on manufacturers are both really key considerations anytime that DOE is considering updates to appliance standards. And DOE does sophisticated, in-depth analysis of the impacts on individual consumers, taking into account both the incremental upfront cost as well as the bill savings over the life of the equipment. And the results of those analyses do play a big role in determining which standard levels make sense to adopt. I think what we've seen over time, as I mentioned, in many cases, prices of products have actually declined over time as they've become more efficient. What we've also seen, work by LVNL has shown that has really demonstrated that, and they've characterized what's referred to as the learning rate, which is as manufacturers kind of gain experience in producing products, that typically the costs go down. And so we also see that over time, something that may not have been cost effective in a previous iteration of a rulemaking is now cost effective because the cost has declined significantly over time.
Okay, thank you. The next question I'm just going to throw out to our panel. It's a question about electrification, the question is, how can we use appliance standards to drive electrification? Does anyone on the panel want to field that question?
Well, Andrew, I'll say a few words and hope others will chime in. First of all, energy efficiency and building electrification really go hand in hand. Both are really important. And as we make buildings more efficient in terms of their shells, the equipment in them, we bring down the cost of electrifying buildings. And we know that building electrification is another big part of the climate puzzle, and that we need to get fossil fuels out of our homes and buildings. And I think there are a variety of creative ways that DOE can factor that into their rulemakings. We'll point to the example, for instance, of furnaces, where the home furnace efficiency standard really hasn't been updated in any significant way for a really long time. And improving furnace efficiency, can give electrification a big push in various ways. And I think one creative challenge for the Biden administration overall is to think about how electrification and the efficiency standards program work together and use their existing authority, which is quite broad, to factor that into rulemakings and to ask Congress for additional authority if they feel that's needed.
Okay, Charlie or Joanna, do you want to add on to that? One point I would add is that, as Joanna reported, we found that improving appliance standards has a big effect on peak demand, summer peaks. We estimated that the savings from updating standards could reduce peak demand by 2050 by an amount equal to 13% of current peaks. Helping to keep a lid on the growth in peak demand and reducing peak demand makes a big contribution towards, as we're electrifying more products, you have to be bringing down the peak so that you don't drive up the need for additional marginal production and infrastructure that's going to just add cost for consumers unnecessarily. So there's a strong connection between making our existing stock of appliances and equipment more efficient, so that as you add more electrical appliances, we're not overstressing the grid and adding costs, much of which gets shared among all consumers as infrastructure. So the combination of improving efficiency as you electrify is really critical, or else it's going to be much harder to meet those goals of net zero emissions on the grid, net zero emissions for the economy, if we don't also at the same time reduce our peak demand levels. And Joanna, just a follow-on for you, based on the research, can you comment on which of the standards were most important for saving peak demand?
Sure. So we found that the most important are air conditioners, and that's because much of the operation of air conditioners coincides with times of peak demand. But we also found that other products whose energy consumption is more evenly distributed throughout the year can still have a significant impact on reducing peak demand just due to the significant electricity savings. So some of the things, things like water heaters, light bulbs, commercial refrigeration equipment, commercial industrial fans, even though their operation doesn't coincide as much with peak demand periods, because the potential savings are so large, they can also contribute substantially to reducing peak demand.
Okay, thank you. We're at the top of the hour, so I want to just close by thanking everyone who attended our webinar briefing today. It's been a real pleasure to present this report and these findings. As you can imagine, it was a big piece of work over the past 12 months by our team. We want to also thank our speakers, Charlie Herrick and Kit Kennedy, for presenting with us today and participating in our webinar. All registrants will receive a link to the slides and the recording. Thank you again for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.